I told this to yung taga Paite because he's a very good craftsman. Si Baltimore, sabi ko, you know, sabi ko, you will be rich and you will be famous, but you will never be great until you make social comment.
Ang Waywaya ay isang maikling kwento ni pambansang alagad ng sining, F. Sionil Jose. Ang Waywaya ay isang Ilocanong salita na ang ibig sabihin ay kalayaan. Upang magbasa ng sipi mula sa Waywaya, narito ang ilang kasapi ng Romancing Venus na sina Cookie Tuason, Opaline Santos, Sige Gomera at Marty Tenco.
He returned to the cove. Actually, a small turn of the river that was hidden by a wall of low branches. Within, it was a pool that was fed by a spring, and beyond the spring, up a sandy bar, was a sprout of cogon behind which he had slept the night before. He had taken care
that there was no trace of him in the sand, so that when he went to the spring to drink, he had wiped out his tracks carefully. Now he went to sleep, and once rested, he would merely race across the river to the sanctuary of his own land. It was long past morning when he woke up, alive to the twitter of birds, the jabber of monkeys, the scent of moss and green living things. He lay on his back, motionless, for some time, gazing at the cloud-flecked sky.
It was then that a rustling to his right jarred him from his reverie. He keened to the footfalls on the grass and dried leaves. Whoever was approaching was not trying to hide his presence. Then she burst into view, a girl, lovely as morning and just as fair, her hair knotted to the left above her ear. A fine blue tattoo of flower designs ran in a thin line down her arms to her wrists. She knelt down before the rim of the pool and gazed at her reflection there, then stood up, untied the knot of her blue sack dress on her shoulder and let it slip down her feet. She stood naked and true and beautiful, her face upraised to catch a bit of sun, her breasts and nipples touched with pink. Her stomach was flat, and below the patch of pubic hair, her legs were supple and well-shaped. She stooped and untied the thongs of her leather sandals. Then she walked nimbly into the water, shivering. At first, as she tested it with her toe. Then she plunged and splashed about. She dived to the shallow depths and the clear water. He could follow her lissom, figure turning then surfacing to float on her back so that her breasts were shiny with water and sun.
Dio watched, keeping his ears keen. He wanted to know, if she had companions, but he could hear only the rustle of the wind in the trees, the gurgling of the river as it coursed through boulders and shallows. He had stashed across the river an iron plowshare, a piece of newly woven cloth, a quiver of iron-tipped arrows. Now he would also bring home a slave, healthy, young, and good to look at. With her sandals, her bangles of gold, she was no simple peasant. She must come from the upper class of Laud. His agile mind quickly devised a way by which he would capture her with the least resistance and trouble. It seemed that she would swim forever, but finally, she made for her clothes. By then, Dio had crouched closer to her things, and as she stooped to gather them, he rushed out and pinned her arms, clamping a hand over her mouth. That was a mistake, for she bit his hand. The pain was sharp, and his response was immediate. He spun her around and struck her in the jaw. There was this dumb, surprised look on her face as she staggered backwards and fell. Dio bound her hands and feet and gagged her mouth. He gathered her clothes, her sandals, then erased the signs of struggle on the sand. And heaving her on his shoulders, he headed for the river. It did not matter much that he would cross now in the daylight, and if they pursued him, he could easily outrace them. And once he was in the sanctuary of his forest, it was a brave man who would follow him. Once or twice, while he was knee-deep in the water, he turned to look, and again, when he was finally across, no one had seen him. Once across, he laid her on the grass, still naked, while he went back to the water to wash the soot of 3 days from his face and body. When he returned, she had revived, and she cringed at his approach. You're heavy, Dio said, smiling, and look at my hand, you little wildcat.
He waved his right hand, which had begun to swell, her teeth marks deeply imprinted still below the thumb. She made angry, protesting sounds, shaking her head. She tried to rise, but then she realized it was useless to struggle. She did not move anymore. In the sunlight, looking closer at her, she seemed fairer and prettier than when he first saw her. That was that the Tagalaod women were noted for, unlike the women of Daya, who had darker skin. You are good for the eyes, Dayo said, moving closer and tweaking her nipples. She glared at him but did not move, and very soon the nipples hardened. Pleased with himself, Dayo smiled. If you promise not to make trouble, he said with a laugh, I will give you back your clothes. She nodded quickly. We have a long way to go, a whole day's march, and I don't want to carry you. He helped her to her feet, and as she stood up, he realized that she was tiny. She did not even reach up to his shoulder. He went beside her and ran a hand down the curve of her back at her buttocks. Then he untied her hands and feet. Free at last, she spread her arms and stamped her feet. She picked the sack dress up and put it on. When she looked at him again, she picked the sack dress up and put it on. When she looked at him again, entreaty was in her eyes. Yes, I will hit you again. Yes, he said, raising his fist, if it cannot be tamed, and I do not want to do that. Shortly before midday, he found the water tubes, the dried meat, and the cakes of brown sugar that he had hidden under the trunk of a dead tree. He ate, and when he was through, he gave her a little of what was left. She was hungry and thirsty too, but she refused what he offered her. Dio shrugged. If you don't want to eat, then march on an empty stomach.
By nightfall, she still had not spoken a word. Her jaw had begun to swell, and he wondered if he had hit her so hard that her tongue had been cut. In the dimming light, he held her face. She winced. "Open your mouth," he said, but she refused. He glared at her and raised his fist. Slowly, she opened her mouth. No, her tongue was not cut, and her breath was warm and sweet like a baby's upon his face.
He gazed at the stolen eyes, at the mouth, the nose. He really had a good-looking slave, perhaps better looking than any of the young women he knew. Even Lulua, with whom he already spent many nights. They reached a gully where saplings grew, and at this time of the year, the gully was dry.
He told her to recline against a sapling. He tied her hands behind the young tree and then her feet. It was not that he feared treachery. It was that she might run away and be captured by another Tagadaya, and he would then lose all claim to her. She seemed resigned, and at once did she protest.
Muli, maraming salamat sa mga kasapi ng Romancing Venus, sila Cookie Tuason, Opaline Santos, Sige Gomera, at Marty Tenco. Muli po natin silang bigyan ng palakpakan. Upang magbigay pugay kay F. Sionil Jose, pambansang alagad ng sining para sa panitikan, narito ang kritiko mula sa Manila Critics Circle, kasapi ng Bienvenido N. Santos Creative Writing Center, profesor sa De La Salle University at miyembro ng Executive Board ng Philippine Center of International Pen, si Dr. Shirley O. Lua.
Our esteemed national artists, distinguished audience, ladies and gentlemen, a blessed evening. May I express my warmest felicitations to the University of the Philippines Press for 50 enduring years of publishing power and for its unyielding commitment to the service of Philippine publications. More power to you and your team, Dr. Neil Garcia. It is my pleasure to offer a few words to honor Dr. F. Sionil Jose, or Manong Frankie, as he is fondly called. I would like to single out 3 of his myriad of fortes and accomplishments. First, the potency of his writing. French philosopher Simone Weil has remarked that only 2 things pierce the heart: beauty and affliction. The works of Jose possess both. They are narratives of pain recounted in beauty. In the literature classes in my university, the fictions of Jose are invariably some of the required readings. For instance, My Brother, My Executioner, The Pretenders, Mass, Ermita, among others. The students who read the required text are riveted by the story. Girls would approach me to tell me they shed buckets of tears over the story, and guys would linger at the end of the class, a troubled expression in their eyes, and ask, "What happened to Louis Asperi?" Or, "Why did Tony Sampson end his life?" Indeed, one cannot discount Jose's stories as some of the most heart-rending Filipino masterworks. Their disturbing potency, on par with that of Jose Rizal's Noli Me Tangere or Carlos Bolosan's America is in the Heart. Of intricate design and magnitude, Jose's fictions are judicious observations of humanity, candid exposés of the ills of society, and the ever investigation of our national identity. The individual narratives are set against a backdrop of socio-historical events, significations of the violence and vicissitudes in our nation's chronicle, from colonialisms to agrarian unrest and social injustices, from oppressive rules and class struggles to natural adversities. What Jose has done is to bear the wounds of history and allow them to cry out as witnesses to its traumas. Through his recollection and reconstruction of these experiences, Jose seeks to impart stories of a larger history that are otherwise unavailable, that in their latency need to be addressed. His intrepid act is a recovery and a repossession of what is not available or fully known, what is hidden or repressed in the national psyche. In turn, these stories become testimonies of our people's claim to survival, of resistance against destruction and death, and of the hopeful possibility of forming new histories. Second, his relentless, admirable efforts to advance the cause of Philippine literature through the many bold ventures he has undertaken. One foreign journalist has remarked that Frankie is, and I quote, "a constant catalyst, a conduit for the exchange of knowledge. Beyond being a fountain of knowledge himself, he knows where all the other fountains can be located," unquote. More than that, where fountains are not available, particularly during the years of political turmoil, Jose has dug up well springs and provided oases of resources for many a pilgrim writer. One fountainhead is the Solidaridad bookshop. Solidaridad is a granary for the Filipiniana collections, where other supply stores fail to carry the titles of, say, the University of the Philippines Press. They can be found in Frankie's quaint little cubbyhole in Ermita. It is a delightful sanctuary for writers and intellectuals to break bread and lift their spirits while trading ideas or swapping political chismis. One visitor enthused that it is, and I quote, one of the centers of cultural life in the Philippines, unquote. Incidentally, Solidaridad celebrated its golden anniversary last year. Equally, a fountainhead is the Philippine Center of International Pen. This writers' organization, founded by Jose, continues to hold high the banner of free speech. It has issued resolutions and communique in defense of freedom of expression, a modest endeavor to sustain a healthier climate for democratic exchange, dissent, and human rights. Its manifold activities and projects across the archipelago, conferences, publications, book launchings, readings, fora, seminars, workshops, promote Philippine traditions and render decent services to local communities of writers, teachers, and students. Under the visionary stewardship of Jose, PEN has enjoyed amiable interactions with other PEN centers abroad, organized ASEAN conferences, and hosted the visits of distinguished foreign writers, including Nobel laureates Wole Soyinka, Ganta Gras, and Mario Vargas Llosa, among many others. Philippine PEN will turn 60 in 2 years' time. Third, his unquenchable generosity as a human being. Manong Frankie is one of the biggest-hearted organisms on planet Earth. Let me draw a partial list of facts for you. He presents moleskin notebooks to friends. He sends little caring notes to praise your writing efforts. He takes you on an adventure with him to his beloved Rosales and to see the breathtaking Lingayen Gulf. He treats you to delicious shabu-shabu or the wicked bagnet. He serves the best bottle from his wine cellar. He lets students sit at his feet and listen to his merry anecdotes. He holds free lectures on fiction and history, just this morning at LaSalle. He sponsors an emerging writer from the province to attend a Manila conference. He opens his house to the homeless nomad writer. And most of all, to quote his good friend Alfredo Rosas, Frankie has, and I quote, amazing and extreme tolerance for abrasive characters who suck in their only oxygen and plastic beatniks who I can only describe with a lamentable failure of words as, well, assholes. Unquote. This is the Frankie personage in all his magnificent princely soul. Manong Frankie, thank you for your passion for the word, your zest for all sorts of escapades, and your belief in humanity's true grit. We salute you for your lush legacy to Philippine art and letters. Mabuhay.
Maraming salamat po, Dr. Shirley Olua. Inaanyayahan naman po namin sina UP Press Director Sionil C. Garcia at Dekana ng CAL, Amihan Bonifacio Ramolete, upang magbigay ng katibayan ng pasasalamat Pagpupugay DVD at UP Press Kit kay pambansang alagad ng sining F. Sionil Jose. Palakpakan po natin sila.
I have had many friends in the student body as well as teachers in this university from way back in 1946. Way back. Yung mga akasya niyan, they were all saplings at the time. Ganitong, see? Now look at those acacia trees. And I think that I have also made a couple of contributions to your university, although I did not study here. One, I envisioned your university press. I was the one who set it up when General Romulo was president. No, that's quite a story. The other is I also set up in Los Baños the Agrarian Reform Institute when the president of UP was Salvador Lopez. Yan na. I owe a lot to this university, not only yung PhD na binigay sa akin ni Pepe Abueva, but the many loyal friendships from the students as well as the faculty. Among them, I also owe a lot to Bien, but I will tell you that in private. Thank you.